Hello everyone, welcome back to another video. Today we will be talking about the US Senate elections in 2024. Of course, each branch of government is just as important as the rest. So while we talk about the presidential race, the House elections and the Senate elections are just as important. And this video is about how Democrats are really doomed when it looks like they are doomed when it comes to keeping control of the Senate. The Democrats have gotten so much good news lately about the presidential race, with Kamala Harris surging in the polls, I believe most likely to become the next president of the United States. However, that same momentum is not quite translating into the Senate races, and that is because they just have such a difficult map. Now, they way outperformed expectations in the 2022 Senate races. If you remember, it was supposed to be a big red wave, and what do you know? They were supposed to lose Nevada's seat, Arizona's seat, Pennsylvania, Republicans would keep Pennsylvania, and maybe even lose Georgia as well. However, what ended up actually happening was that Democrats gained a seat. It was 50-50 beforehand. You see, after 2020, it was 50 Democrats in the Senate, 50 Republicans. But after 2022, Democrats picked up the seat in Pennsylvania, giving them 51 seats to the Republicans' 49. However, 2022, despite it supposedly being a red wave year, it was not at all. This map, I should say, was much friendlier for the Democrats than in 2024. 2024, they just have a much tougher map. Yes, you've got some traditional battlegrounds, like Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, Nevada, and Arizona, but in all of those, they are held, currently in every single one, they are held by a Democratic incumbent. So, they aren't flipping these states and expanding their majority and maybe having some room if they flip one of these states to lose a different Democratic incumbent. No, in every single one, Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, Arizona, and Nevada, these traditional swing states, they have Democratic incumbents. So they have to defend all of them. You've got Texas and Florida. Those are all of the toss-up states right now that I've listed on this map. Texas and Florida are the only two with Republican incumbents. These are the only two semi-competitive. They're barely even competitive at all. But maybe you could say these races are competitive, and these are the only two out of the 9 that have Republican incumbents. So point being, the Democrats have a lot more ground to defend and not really any room to expand their majority like they had in 2022. However, not to mention the biggest factor in all of this are 2 states, Montana and Ohio. Both of these states somehow have Democratic senators. We see that in the 2020 election. Let me just go back to the presidential. In Ohio, the state voted for Trump by 8%. Montana voted for Trump by 16.4%. These are deep red states. Somehow in 2018, both of these senators, Sherrod Brown in Ohio, was able to win by 6.8%, and Jon Tester was able to win by 3.6%. So they not only do they have to defend Democrats in traditional battleground states, which they absolutely can do, they also have to hold on in deep red states, Montana and Ohio. Now, also what makes this so much more difficult for Republicans is this state of West Virginia. Currently, Joe Manchin, a Democrat, represents the seat. Now, West Virginia voted for Trump by 34%. The Republicans ran an awful candidate in 2018. Joe Manchin was the incumbent. He was barely able to hang on, but he did hang on in West Virginia. Of course, he is a moderate Democrat fit for West Virginia. Now, Joe Manchin is not running again. He would have been doomed even if he did run, but he is not running again. That is an automatic flip for the Republicans. That is automatic flip for the Republicans. So what does that mean? That means this 51-49, it already becomes 50-50. That's huge. That is so important. It becomes 50-50 automatically just like that. Now, the good news for Democrats, the small piece of good news, is that they are likely to win the presidency at this point, in my estimation at least. So, if a tie does occur in the Senate, the vice president, of course, casts the tie-breaking vote. So that means Tim Walz would then be the president of the Senate, and that means that, he would cast the tie-breaking vote, and therefore Democrats would have majority in the Senate if it is a 50-50 occurrence and Kamala Harris wins the presidency. But what that means is that if once they lose West Virginia and it becomes 50-50, then they would have to win all of the other Democratic seats currently. All the current Democratic seats. They only have one to spare, and when you have Montana, which voted for Trump by 16 points, and you've got Ohio, which voted for Trump by 8 points, that will be extremely hard to do. So let's play out some scenarios. I really expect Florida and Texas to go Republican. I doubt anything else will happen. I would be absolutely shocked if either of these get competitive. So what do you see? It already becomes 50 seats for the Republicans. Democrats have zero wiggle room. Now, Bob Casey looks very strong in Pennsylvania. Tammy Baldwin looks very strong in Wisconsin. Both are incumbents. Newcomer Ruben Gallego looks very strong in Kyrsten Sinema's seat in Arizona. I highly believe that I really doubt Republicans will be able to flip Jackie Rosen's seat in Nevada. And this race does look increasingly competitive, but I do think that Alyssa Slotkin, a U.S. representative, will take Debbie Stabenow's seat in Michigan. So that's good. They take all of the traditional swing states. I'm pretty confident at all of these. I would really be shocked if Republicans do win Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, Arizona, or Nevada Senate races. So it does really come down to Montana and Ohio. And to be completely honest with you, I do think that Sherrod Brown does have enough split ticket ability to be able to win in Ohio. I mean, in 2020, and there's a deep contrast between Montana and Ohio. I mean, in 2020, Montana voted for Trump by 16, but Ohio only voted for Trump by 8. The difference between 8 and 16 is extremely significant. I believe that even in these deeply partisan times, I believe that even if Trump does win by 8 or 9 again, I really do think that Sherrod Brown is popular enough of a senator to hang on. And trust me, I do know how insane that sounds, because if in 2016 and 2020, in those two election years, of all the Senate races that occurred on the same ballot, it only occurred one time that a state voted one party on the presidential level, but the other party on the Senate level. That was in 2020 in the state of Maine. Joe Biden won Maine, but moderate Republican Susan Collins hung on. So trust me, I know how insane it sounds to say that Trump will win by 8, but Sherrod Brown will hang on by 1. But really, I mean, look at, this is another contrast with Montana. Look at 2018 now, just for a second. Jon Tester won by 3.6. But Sherrod Brown won by almost 7%. 7% is not a 1-point victory. If Trump won in 2016, wrong election. But if Trump won by 9 in 2016, and then Sherrod Brown hung on by a point 2 years later, I would think, when it's now on the same ballot, right? I didn't mention this before, but what allowed Tester and Brown to win in 2018 was the fact that it was a midterm election. Voter turnout is lower, and voters are much less partisan. If they are voting one way on the presidential level, they are much more likely to vote for that same party down ballot on the Senate level, on the House level. It just happens. But in a midterm election, if you're turning out in a midterm election, you're less partisan. You're more likely to vote for a different party, even if you're not registered in that party. So you've got Ohio voted for Sherrod Brown by 7 points. And that is pretty significant. He didn't just hang on by a point. He won by 7 points. That's huge. That is in stark contrast with the margin in Montana. Jon Tester only hung on by 3.6. It was an extremely narrow race. Now, in Montana in 2024, we also see similarities to the 2020 election when Jon Tester is not on the ballot, and Steve Daines, the Republican, beat the popular governor, Steve Bullock, by 10 points exactly. So in 2024, these are the polls in Montana. Jon Tester, the Democrat, is against Tim Sheehy, the Republican, and we see that the polls are favoring Tim Sheehy, at least the recent ones. He's up by 2, by 5, by 6, even, by 3, by 3. And then this was from March, so this was, before Tim Sheehy was that recognizable of a name. That was when Jon Tester led, but you can see that as Tim Sheehy's name recognition built up, then he has taken the lead. And always, voters are much less partisan when answering polls versus when they are actually filling out their ballot. So, point being, it being a presidential election year makes it very unlikely, all in all, that Jon Tester does. Hang on, one more point. Looking at 2020, the polls showed a very tight race. Steve Daines up by 4, Bullock +1, Steve Daines. So they were very mixed. And what do you know? Steve Bullock ended up losing by 10, even though many polls had him winning. And again, that's because people are way less partisan when answering the polls, but when they actually go to fill out their ballot on election day, they vote for Trump, and then they say, yeah, I'm voting Republican down ballot as well. And that is what resulted in close polls, some polls showing Bullock winning, but in fact, he actually lost by 10% to Steve Daines. That is his name, yeah, Steve Daines. So, I highly doubt Montana will go to Jon Tester. Maybe if it was a little closer in 2020, if it was less of a Republican state and it went to Trump by 16, if it was more like 8 points like Ohio, that's one thing. But Montana plus 16 for Trump, you just wouldn't see Trump win by 16 or 17 in 2024 and then Jon Tester win on the same ballot. It's impossible. It really is. Jon Tester is doomed in 2024, and that's why the Democrats in the Senate are all doomed in 2024 as well. So thank you all for watching this video. If you enjoyed, make sure to subscribe down below. We're trying to get to 10,000 subscribers before the election. And again, thank you all for watching, and I'll see you all next time.